Tax is a killer. Stress is the number one cause of death in the Western world. And what's the number one cause of stress? Simple. Money, or rather lack of money. Why do we pay so much tax? Where does it go? Understanding that puts us in a good position to start managing the rest of our lives. So welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters. My name's Paul Smith. I'm sure you know if you've seen this before, I deeply, truly believe that money does matter. And a typical normal person, I'm going to say in the UK, probably got a salary of about 40,000, probably got an income from somewhere of about 40,000 pounds. Now, if you work for 50 years at 40,000 pounds a year on average, you earn 2 million pounds. So the question is, who stole my millions? Where do they go? Personal allowance might mean that they can earn 12, 13, 14,000 pounds tax-free. So their expectation is that they're going to pay 20% tax on the balance, on 25 to 30k. And that's where you get your first shock. Because look here at this salary calculator. It's a free resource. You can go and plug in your numbers and you can get your figures. And I would encourage you to do that. But look at that. There's your income tax and there is your national insurance. Which means that by the time you've actually paid your income tax, even after your personal allowance, and paid your national insurance, you've got 31,700 left out of 40,000, which means you've already paid 21% tax, but you haven't started spending money yet. But almost anything that you actually need, you're going to pay more tax. You go and buy a chair, you're going to pay 20% VAT. You go and buy a phone or a computer, you're going to pay 20% VAT. So even on the money that you've already paid tax on, you're going to pay more tax. There are, in fact, in the United Kingdom, 21 different taxes. I'm not going to go into the gory details of all the 21 different kinds of taxes in the UK, but put in the comments if you'd like me to do another separate video on all the ways in which they take tax off us. This is a report from Financial Times, and it's based on data from the ONS. What's the ONS? Well, it's the Office for National Statistics. It's the government. So the average person is in the 5th or 6th decile. So between 40 and 50 or 50 or 60%. Look in those two deciles. Now on the bottom axis, that's thousands of thousands. In other words, millions. So if you look at the 5th and 6th deciles, they've got a household wealth of 200,000 to 300,000 pounds. They've worked their entire life and they've got this wealth of 200,000 to 300,000 pounds, but they've earned 2 million. Where's the rest of it gone? Most of it has gone in tax. Now, my dad was lucky in the sense that he retired at the age of 60 and he lived until he was 78. So he had 18 years of retirement and he died 10 years ago now. Now his pension was pretty good. It was £26,000 a year, so just over £2,000 a month. But what happened to his pension when he died? It got halved, which is what happens to most people. So my mum, who's still alive, bless her, she's 82, she now gets £13,000 a year from my dad's pension, but it's half. And what happens to that pension pot when she dies? Gone. If 50% of your wealth is in your pension and it dies with you, that's not very good for your legacy, is it? So what I want to do is I want to give you some solutions. I want to give you some answers, but I want to do it in the context of you also want a fantastic lifestyle in the meantime. To be able to literally do whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, wherever in the world you want to do it. You already know what I'm going to say. You can't do that on £40,000 a year, can you? And if as well as doing all that stuff, you want to have a fabulous legacy to leave to future generations, you certainly can't do that on £40,000 a year. So what's the solution if you want to change your level of wealth? Let's have a think about that. Now for me, it was all about property. Let's say that you become a property investor. You may want to work with Touchstone on that, or may not. It's up to you. And let's say that you just picked up one average house a year for the next 10 or 15 years. That means that in 10 or 15 years' time, you would have 15 properties, say, that were valued at £300,000 each in today's money. So I'm not worried about inflation. I'm talking about the real current value. 300,000 times 15 will be 4.5 million. And that's just adding one property a year. But take it from me, you work with the right people, doing the right things. I cannot conceive that you couldn't have a property portfolio worth 4.5 million in 15 years' time. Which brings me directly, and the reason I chose that number, to the top 1% of the people in the households in the UK. Look at this 1% line on this same graph that we were talking about earlier. So the top 1% of households in the UK are worth about 4.5 million. But the average person in the UK in that top 1% hasn't built their 4.5 million through property. So roughly 50%, two and a quarter million of their 4.5 million is pension. Now, what did I say earlier? It dies with them. So that's problem number one. But problem two is that you've paid income tax, you've paid national insurance, you've paid VAT, you've been taxed senseless. But somehow, despite all the odds, you've still managed to get 2.5 million quid that's not in your pension. So when you die, what does the lovely government do to you? It taxes you again. It's called death duties. Oh, you stupid boy, you've gone and died. 40%. What? So, yeah, I'm not joking, by the way, it's 40%. So from that 2.25 million you've got left, 40% of that, it's not quite, but bear with me, it makes it easier, call it £1 million, whoever the money's been left to, has got to come up with £1 million of death duties. But there isn't £1 million in cash. There's properties, there's what called physical here, so that's cars and watches and bits of artwork and whatever. So in theory, it's worth 2.5 million, but you've got to give £1 million in cold hard cash to HMRC. Well, how are you going to do that? The only way that most people can do it is by selling the stuff. How long have you got? You've got 6 months. What happens after the 6 months if you don't pony up the money to HMRC? Well, what happens is this. They start charging you interest. So from the 2.5 million where you've got to pay £1 million, you've probably got to flog the lot in some sort of fire sale. So if you're lucky, you might get 60 or 70 pence on the pound. So from the 2.5 million, you might get 1.5 million. You've got to give £1 million to HMRC, which maybe means you've got £500,000 to distribute as the remainder of the will. So can you see how £4.5 million worth of wealth just got vaporised and turned into £500,000? What is the solution when you've created millions of pounds worth of wealth to be able to pass it on to future generations? Well, let's take this in two parts, because the biggest part is your pension. What I did 20 years ago is I came out of the traditional pension sector and I had various company pensions. Now I cashed them all in. It's called a transfer value. You can do this too. And I moved it into a private pension. So I've now got something called a SAS, Small Self-Administered Scheme. One of the many beauties of a SAS is that it's a trust. So when I die, all the money that's in my SAS, zero inheritance tax. So never mind passing it to my kids, my children's 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 children in 250 years' time can be passing that money on down during the generations or through the generations, paying zero tax because it's a trust. So my number one piece of advice to you, or request really, is do something to make sure you understand what's going to happen to that massive chunk of your wealth called your pension when you die. Because what's a pension for? It's to give you money in retirement, but for me, it's legacy. So I want you to be asking those two questions next time you sit down with your pension advisor. And this is super critical, especially if you're about to retire. If you're 55 or 60 or maybe even 65 and you're just about to push that button and retire, please don't until you've understood, yeah, of course, what am I going to get between now and when I die? But then when I die, how do I leave as much as possible to the kids? And my solution has been a SAS. And there's loads of other YouTube videos on this channel about how you can use your SAS to buy commercial property, lend money to your own company. So it does loads of other stuff. But for the purposes of today's Money Matters, I just want to focus on how it protects your pension when you retire. So by changing your level of wealth, you decide to join Touchstone and become a multi-millionaire. It's not like your problems go away, they just change. So I want you to do it knowing, eyes wide open, that you're going to have a different set of issues to deal with, but I also want you to know that we're here for you. Touchstone's mission is to make you wealthy, to give you choices. And I'm certain that one of the choices that you don't want is stress. So to provide you with a total solution that supports your lifestyle and your legacy, we have to also equip you with ways to de-stress you. That's why we offer mindset courses. That's why we introduce you to the professionals that can deal with all this technical stuff. Hope you found this video interesting. Hope you found this video useful. You've been wonderful. I've been Paul. See you next time.